Okay, and there it goes. Cool. Welcome to Project 3. Project 3 is all about tone, light and shadow and depth. So for this project, what you're going to be doing is going through and coming up with a black and white tonal study. In the previous project, you guys were limited to line, to pattern, pure black, pure white, and only one gray. Now we are opening up the floodgates of grays to be able to really do intense tonal studies for this assignment. Let me show you some previous examples of what this project can look like. All righty. So here is one that I did quite a while ago called Dragon at the Dog Park. And this is a pretty cool rendering. I think that these black and white tonal paintings help you guys understand how light and value works a lot better. And this is one of the best, fastest routes within digital painting to getting to a point where you're creating really strong lighting, realistic lighting within your pieces, and thinking about how we can use light and tone to be able to direct the viewer's eyes. So within this example, what is the brightest thing within this composition? It is the fire going on inside the dragon's mouth. That is one of the only areas that's really using pure white within this entire painting. The rest of this painting is filled up with different values of gray. I'm also being very cautious within this painting to where I use pure black. There is very, very little pure black being used within this painting as well. Even though there's a lot of depth and there is a dark colored dog over on the left-hand side, the darkest section within this painting is probably right here. And that's very intentional with why I'm doing this. I'm doing this so that I'm creating the highest area of contrast between the fire inside the dragon's mouth and right underneath it, underneath its collar, so that I'm using these values to push the viewer's attention to what it is I want them to focus on first. Not only that, the dragon is right up in the foreground. It's very expressive. I'm using the grass and as action lines. So you can see all the action lines that are starting to push through here on the grass that have got energy to them to make the feeling of this dragon running really, really fast as it's going off to catch a ball or whatever it is that's been thrown. And it's gone off its leash. And everyone else at the dog park is looking completely freaked by this dragon that's off leash, especially this puggle right over here on the right hand side. He is stressed out and bending backwards. And then we've got this dog over here on the right hand side, and the owner. Everyone is dead eyeing this dog and this dragon, except for its owner, right? And so the owner is sitting back here just looking smug and happy that her pet dragon is having a great day at the dog park. You can see the leash that he was holding as well. And with this, what I want you guys to understand is I've also left her as a slightly brighter character than the other people around, right? So everyone else's face here it's a gray tone and it's dropping back. But you can still see the other characters' expressions. So these two preppy gals over here that maybe just got done with some pickleball or something like that. I don't know. They've got their expressions and they're bright. However, and they've got highlights on them, right? They've still got some form of lighting and form, but it's nowhere near as bright as what's going on with this gal right next to her. We've also been able to achieve a lot of atmospheric perspective and distance within the background by playing with these grays in a subtle, subtle way. And all that stuff is coming together to be able to create a really strong black and white tonal illustration. Let me show you another example. In this one, we'll start with the end, and then I'll show you how I got there. All righty. So this one is called Waiting to Launch is the name of it. And here we have a mech pilot that is, just waiting around for the call so that he can get into his big giant robot and take off and go save the day or go do something heroic, right? I was painting this at a time when I was feeling like I was kind of in a limbo season and just waiting for a bunch of things to take off in my life. And a lot of the same things are going on within this painting that were happening with the dragon and the dog park illustration, in which I'm very carefully figuring out where I want my brightest area to be on the painting, where the darkest area is going to be on this piece, while still including a ton of detail throughout the entire composition that lives in these grays. So, brightest area within this painting is right on the fella's shoulder who's looking at his tablet or his computer. Right, this highlight on his shoulder. I worked with this quite a while to be able to get this to an area that I liked it, and same thing is going on. There's it's not nearly as bright on the mech, but that contrast between the shaded areas and the black back here within his neck really helped to make this highlight on the front stand out in a strong way. And you can see how much detail I'm putting into all of the elements within this piece, in this painting. We're going to back it up and I'm going to show you how I got to this stage so that you guys can better understand how to be able to approach these tonal paintings. One tip before we move away from this final illustration is if you ever find yourself having to do computer screens within an illustration that you're creating, I highly recommend that you guys look up online World War II flight instruments or old computer monitors or computer systems from like pre-1950. The reason for this is they've got a lot of great shape language to them that help them read as air quotes technology. If most of the time, whenever I see students try and include computer screens or a big, Minority Report style, like desktop, with all kinds of buttons on it and everything, they haven't done a lot of studying in their heads about how those big computer boards and screens should look, and they don't have a very deep visual library. I don't have a large visual library for how to be able to do computer screens. Depending on how much retail space those computer screens are taking within your shot, there ain't nothing wrong with taking some old 1950s or World War II era, ship instruments or whatnot, and copying and pasting those, color adjusting them, messing with the levels to where they match with the rest of your painting to be able to fill it in. For this one, these computer screens down here in the lower left-hand side are not the most important thing within my painting. They're just down there to fill up a very small area. When we look at the total retail space of this screen, it's maybe 1/60th of the entire painting. They just get the copy and paste. I'm not going to break my hand trying to fill in every little section here. Now, before we leave this final polished painting, this is something that I would like for you guys to consider as well, is as we are moving into these tonal paintings, that your paint needs to be more refined. You really need to be able to go in there and go into the details within these paintings. So as we start to zoom in on this character's eye, we can see that, yeah, the line work, it could have a little bit more depth to it, but I've really considered all of the highlights on the vents, on, how the mech's head is opening up, the shading and the depth on the inside of it. And I want you guys to have much, much cleaner paintings digitally for this next project than perhaps you have done in the past. So even here on the character's tablet, there's a little bit of a highlight going on around the edge of the tablet, and there's some some indication of what the texture of the tablet looks like. This thing is fully designed out, and really get into those micro little details on this project. Now, there ain't nothing wrong with still going back and adding texture at the very end. So on this big old kind of crane piece over on the right-hand side, I decided that I could muck it up a little bit more when I was detailing at the end, and I added like some rusty metal texture that I'd done desaturated and added an overlay to, just to be able to give it a little bit more roughness within the space so that it looks a little bit cleaner. This is one of the only areas within this painting that you're going to see unrefined brushwork that I haven't gone back and fixed or cleaned up. And so this is sort of the level of professionalism that you want when you're looking at a fully rendered painting. So let's see how this piece began. In the beginning, for the waiting to launch painting, I started off and I started sketching. And with my sketch, I started up in the top right-hand side because I'm left-handed, and I tried to draw the entire scene. I tried to draw the mech's head, and he ended up having this like American Revolution cap on, like Paul Revere type thing, and it wasn't working. I had too many elements that need to be developed separately, and a lot of times you're going to find that this happens to yourself within your own sketches, especially if you've got any kind of complex item in there that you've never really drawn before. You need to slow down. Don't try and get it all right within the first sketch. You might realize that your brain isn't really kind of working through everything. So I had to slow down. I had to stop and think about the space. I knew that I wanted the mech to still be in the water, but I needed to get the rest of my scene figured out. I knew I wanted it to be a mech that's like halfway underwater by the ocean. And so I took the mech out on my second sketch and figured out what that space was going to look like. I knew I wanted to have the pilot in there, and I had the concept, but I need to develop things. So this is my initial thumbnail sketch for this piece. Now, even though this thumbnail is extremely rough, right? This is not that refined of a sketch. I'm still thinking through all the major portions within this piece. And this is the part that I keep on echoing to you guys that I want y'all to understand with these well-developed sketches is I'm really thinking through every little part. So when it comes to this crane type structure over here on the right-hand side, this is pretty accurate to how this thing ended up. So you can see the windows that are in there. You can see that little round shape, the different pieces that are sticking out underneath it, the handrail up at the top. The same thing goes. I knew I wanted to have some kind of patterning underneath and what the different layers of this upper handrail section were going to look like. Even down here, I've got the indication of my computer console. I know that at this stage, I don't need to figure out something that's going to be 1/60th of my entire painting, but I know that that's going to be there, and I've got the trick of using the 1950s consoles already up my sleeve. And so I'm starting to think about what the overhang is going to look like as well, planning out the far background and how my clouds are going to look, because clouds are a visual element as well, and those are going to help you judge or help move the viewer's eye through the painting in important and interesting ways. So I was happy with this composition. I felt like it worked well. And then I needed to go in and design the mech. Tried the mech a second time, again on a square. It didn't quite work. So I had to go back to the drawing board, look at a bunch of different reference images of mech designs and Gundams and stuff. And that allowed me to be able to go in there and come up with a really cool mech design that I was satisfied and happy with. So that Paul Revere hat thing that I was doing ended up turning into this. So it's still there. It's more refined. The face structure started looking correct. I got the balance of clear space, like resting space on the mech, and then the super details and tight areas that I wanted on the character's helmet and body. And then I knew from this tiny little thumbnail that I started with in the beginning, I would have no chance getting enough detail for this full digital drawing of the character sitting on the rail. I think that might be the start of that little circular line there, might be the start of me trying to draw his knee. And I was like, nope, it's too small. I can't really design him. So then I ended up redrawing the character and really thinking through all the details. So it's not just a leg. I'm thinking about the pants. What does the clothing look like? You know, what does the boot structure look like? How are his shoes formed? Is he wearing gloves? Is he not wearing gloves? You know, what does the character's hair look like? And I'm thinking through all this stuff at my well-refined sketch stage. I hope that makes enough sense to you guys. Now, from there, because we have the magic of Photoshop, what I'm going through and doing is I've set up my canvas, I bring in my background, and then I start cutting out those other pieces from my sketch and pasting those in there and pushing and pulling and moving these things around to where I feel like the balance of the characters is the right size and the right scale. All right, so there's the finished one. Here's the sketch. So within my original sketch, it was just a thumbnail. Not everything is going to be completely accurate to size, right? So I ended up determining that the crane type object on the right-hand side was just too large or was competing with the character's head too much, and I needed more negative space there. So I ended up pushing that and cutting it and moving it around. But this is a great way to be able to build highly detailed compositions within Photoshop. Now, the next step that I go through and do, since I'm no longer using line, I'm working fully tonally. That's a big thing for this next project. No more line work, guys. Time to leave those behind. We're getting rid of the lines and we're working fully in tonal paintings here. The next step is going to be the color blocking. Even though we're working in black and white, I still want to go through and start defining my color space. Now, I know that the sun's going to be out and the sky is going to be bright, but it's not a pure white within the background. That's still a light gray. And then the ocean is going to be a slightly darker light gray. And I want to, because I'm creating atmospheric perspective, the gray overhangs are a dark gray, but they're not as dark as the handrail that's in the foreground, right? So as things move closer to us with atmospheric perspective, they become darker, more saturated with higher contrast between blacks and whites, whereas things that move further away, the atmosphere, the water vapor in the air starts to get in the way, and it starts to lessen the saturation and things become more gray, less contrast, closer to the color of the sky in terms of tone. So there it is. You're going to block out each one of these little sections. Once you block out these sections, we're going to go through and we are going to start building from the very back of this painting towards the foreground. And you're going to start painting the heck out of this thing. So this is me roughing in my cloud structures and starting to build in some of those details. I'm learning a lot about my painting from this particular stage. The mech is a whole nother animal, it's a whole nother beast, but I'm starting to render my sky. You can see how much that sky changed, right? It's no longer just that flat gray color. We've got a darker color up at the top, a much brighter color towards the horizon. We're starting to get some lines in there going through the for the clouds. The clouds are feeling a little bit too heavy to me, a little bit overly rendered. So I end up softening those up later on. That's something that I battle through. But here's a little bit of the line art project sticking around, right? This is the vapors of that, to where even within this middle gray space, I've got some tones and some brushwork that I've been able to create that give it a nice energy and a nice rhythm in the sky that's going to help build through the rest of the painting. Now I'm starting to establish some subtle gradients within this piece for the overhangs as well. I don't know if you can see that this is lighter because it's moving further away, and then it gets darker as we start to get closer to our foreground. So this massive piece starts to look really large and like it's getting bounce lighting coming off the water as well. And then I'm really starting to do some good work building up texture and design back here within this cement wall so that it's not just a blank gray wall that's in the background, but instead I'm really giving it some consideration and thinking about the formation of how these structures are built, right? So how are the blocks cut? How can I use the lines that construct this object to be able to add rhythm to the rest of the piece? Hope that makes sense. All right. So from there, I went through and did my first pass on my mech fellow. And so what that ended up being, I want to slow down here and talk about this. We're starting from our middle tone, and then from the middle tone, I'm going in and I'm doing my shadow pass for the most part of this character. I don't think there's a little bit of a highlight that I'm starting in the top right-hand side. But first thing I'm going to go in and do is start working into the shadow parts on this character. And I'm really, really covering a lot of ground here with this first pass. Now the mech, as we move forward, up you can see he got himself a whole nother wing to the edge of his head. It does look better. Starts to come together. And then I'm working my way towards the foreground and then refining each one of these little bits. So between that first background piece, right? So here's the block color, first pass to the background. Get your eyes on the clouds as we move into that next pass with the mech. And now all of a sudden you can see those clouds start to soften up. Let me show you the previous one again. You can see how rough and granular the clouds look. And now I'm softening up some of those gray tones so that they're not pulling the viewer's attention quite as much anymore. Each time I'm refining my shadows and my shading. And getting closer and closer to the end on this painting. There you go. So final highlights and light pass. Big difference with that final tonal lighting in there to be able to give the sense of atmosphere. And that's where y'all are headed. So it's very important here. We've done away with line work. We're working purely in tone and tonal painting. That you take this thing in stages. From your sketch, make sure you have a well-developed sketch. Move forward into your color blocking with some consideration for atmospheric perspective, even from this stage with the color blocking. Working from the background to the foreground in your painting, and then going back to your final details. Now, for this painting, within my gutter in the left-hand side, I pulled my composition out and had room to be able to insert reference images. This was the reference image that I used. I can't remember if this thing started off as a black and white picture, but that's okay. Well, as you guys are going through and gathering your own reference images, I highly recommend that, if you find a colored image that you think has cool lighting or a good sense of lighting within it, copy that sucker, bring it into Photoshop, turn it into black and white, and you'll be so surprised how much you can learn from taking some of these colored renderings and then turning them into black and white. And as you start to pick your colors within this process for this black and white tonal painting, I did not come up with any of those colors out of my own brain. I used the colors, the black and white tones within this piece to direct all my decisions for my own rendering. So from this, I don't think that's even the final one, to that. And this helped me out the entire way, right? It gave me that weird middle tone for where to be able to start my sky. So I look at, when I'm looking at the sky itself, what's the brightest tone, what's the darkest tone that they have in here, and saw the gradient that was occurring, and knowing that's something that I can certainly paint within my own painting. I also really, as I'm studying this reference image, looking at the the use of texture, how they're painting their brush strokes in here, how they're leaving some of those brush forms still a little bit rough. Not everything is super refined in the atmospheric parts. You know, we still got sharp, straight lines. How are they handling the lighting within this shot? And now I can see them adding that gradient in those tight little lines, even in these dark gray areas. And this isn't something that I would think up on my own. This piece also worked well for me because it had unique handrail design, right? So the handrails here aren't boring. They're sci-fi handrails. There's some good consideration to that handrail design that's happening. It's unusual. And we've got a big, massive ship within the middle ground of this painting that feels huge. It feels large. Why does it feel large? The ship feels large because it has got good resting space for the viewer's eyes, and it's using the 70-30 rule. So 70% of the ship is pretty clean in terms of the design of it, and then 30% of the ship right here becomes really, really busy and visually noisy. And it works, and it makes it feel nice and large to us. You can even see, you know, this was the inspiration for that crane over there on the right-hand side, and how they went through and painted that also. So I'm not inventing the wheel. I'm not, creating fire for the first time in human existence on this painting. I'm using a reference image heavily to be able to inform my decisions, to be able to tell the story that I want to tell. And along the way, I'm having a conversation with my own painting, my hand, my head, and especially this reference image. So right here, we can see the computer console that they put in the recessed area. I thought this was a really nice touch. I also really like the way that they broke up the ground within this region. And all of that came together to influence how I would end up painting my ground over here on the right-hand side, right? They can see that below the bridge, it's not just boring. There's not just nothing there. I've really considered how it is. I'm going to paint all that stuff and thought about putting in texture for the cement so that it doesn't just feel smooth. So some items are a little bit more rough. Some items are a little bit more smooth. When you look at this flooring here, the flooring has got a pattern, right? So I haven't forgotten the lessons from that last project. I'm using patterns selectively throughout this project to be able to come together to make a pretty rad result. Waiting to launch. Okay, so let's see here if we've got any other examples of this project that I want to talk you guys through. That's sort of all the steps on this one. Go back to the online version, number 3. Okay, yeah, let's look at some other paintings real quick here that I did not do, but that might be useful for yourselves as you're approaching this project. Key elements that you want to look out for are going to be a source of lighting, right? Atmosphere within this, a space that you're rendering, and how that light source or multiple light sources are interacting with that area. This is another really cool one where we've got a fellow by a campfire. And I love this one because the night sky isn't the blackest thing within the scene. Oftentimes we think, oh, we've got night. It needs to be completely dark. Not entirely true. Even with this night scene here, they've done a wonderful job of making the night sky sort of a middle gray. It's still got a gradient rolling through it. Those trees in the background has still somehow managed to have atmospheric perspective where they become more of a middle gray. And then the trees within our foreground that are framing and blurry, framing our dude by the fire, are the darkest things within the shot. And it's a really beautiful rendering of lighting and light study of someone being lit by candlelight and how the lighting affects different materials. I think this is a beautiful image. This one's really nice as well with the way that they've used the black and white and used a little bit of a perspective blur within this one also. But we've got the strong light source coming from the outside in sort of a photography way to where the light is super, super bright. It's coming down, it's highlighting our character that's standing out against the darker background. And then we've got the floor within there that's also a really nice composition. I think this one might have been a student, maybe, that did this one. And yeah, it turned out really nice. So we've got another bright light source. The character is about to face a whole bunch of guards going through the door. Really nice reflections and refractions happening off of the steps. Kind of a glowing forest that's going on around just to be able to give some interest to our character with the extremely ornate and shiny metal plate on him. Let's see if I can find any student examples here from projects past. Right. Good boy. Yeah. That one, it's okay. It's okay. This one, sort of a mix between the line art project and the tonal project. We'll skip that one. Yeah, it's okay. Yeah, that one. Oh, I think they did a really good job on the statue and the foreground here. The sword is a little bit in a strange perspective, but good job with the atmospheric perspective where the stairs are really dark, got nice highlights going on, telling a cool story between the character trying to reach for the sword. This other guy, definitely has him pinned down, and they did a wonderful job. I've seen lots of students in the past try and render statues, or they say, "Oh, I'll just have a big, statue of a god or goddess in the background." These are actually take a lot longer to render than you think they're going to at first. It's like a whole nother character within your piece. So just budget your time if you ever try to do anything with the statue. It takes longer than you think it's going to. Whoa, that one's cool. Look at that. Got teeth and grass and all kinds of tight little things rendered there. One of the things that I'm fine with for this project, just as long as it's in black and white, if you decide to drop a color overlay onto this project at the very end, you're more than welcome to do that, but just don't render, the entire thing in color. So this is a black and white image that's had just a green tint thrown over the top of it. And I think that this one is really, really nice, right? We've got a sense of the light source. I've seen a lot of students over the years try and do creatures in test tubes or somebody in a test tube. And very rarely, when they get to painting this, do they think through the test tube enough. But one of the things that makes this successful is the hanging wires that are like vines within the foreground of this piece. I think the characters have got some good expression. They've done a great job with the glass and the reflections within the glass. Um, Good painterly strokes going on within the walls back here. It's not just a flat color. It's got some rhythm to it and some energy with the mark and making that's going on so that it feels more painterly and it feels treated and considered instead of just having a gray wall with the fuzzy brush where you did a gradient on it. That's going to look cheap and it's going to look fast. There is more refinement that could have been done with this painting, but overall the lighting within the space is working really, really nice. And I think this one turned out beautifully. This one is perhaps an example of an overly ambitious concept. They had so many items within the line work. There was so much detail on this dresser and like all these pieces here. And I was really kind of concerned that they weren't going to be able to properly shade all this stuff. And that's sort of what ended up happening. So I want you guys to consider how many objects you're putting within your scene to be able to make it work and make it successful. And don't forget that these need to be refined and they need to tell some type of story as well. This is a really beautiful rendering here of a dragon type character with some feathers and the girl going to visit her buddy. Dragon is cute and adorable as can be. The lighting is well considered on this piece. It's got some cool tricks to it to where the bushes here are a little bit blurry So there's like a depth of field, or the aperture has been turned up on the camera for a focal distance. And you can see as we get into this piece, I can get in closer, how nicely rendered the girl is, right? These lines are clean. They've got weight to them. Every little bit has been really, really nicely rendered, even on the character's hat, right? So we're really thinking about the rendering, the line structure, the way that we're building things, how the lighting is working here, the gradient on the bottom of the character's chin, all comes together really, really nicely for what it is, for what the focal point of the painting is. Same thing, right? So I've seen people do feathers in the past, and oftentimes the feathers don't really get treated all that well. They're just sort of there, or they're just outlined, and they don't really think about the form or how the lighting is going to work or how to be able to render the feathers in an interesting fashion. And I think that she's done a really nice job here rendering out and softening up some of these feathers and thinking through this painting about that 70-30 rule. So what is the area that I want my audience to focus on? It's this middle portion here. And how can I, add the illusion of detail to give a sense of atmosphere to the space without adding too much? This is one that I see a lot of students do, which is the character facing away from the audience with their back turned, overlooking the landscapes, so sort of man against nature, man appreciating the vastness, the scale of a landscape. I always recommend that if you're going to do a composition like this, have them actually looking at something, give that character a goal, something there, something the audience can understand that they should feel concerned about or they should feel in awe about for what it is that they're actually seeing and witnessing. There's a little bit more color used on this one than I would like. These are supposed to be black and white or just one color over the top, but they've still done a really nice job here of collecting their dark dark sections, their light sections, creating a sense of distance and focus. And it's a well composed image with unique negative space for this character. So this area between the character and the rock over the right hand side, these are really, really well considered negative spaces that are happening. That's an interesting shape that's being created all around, and it works well. You guys, I think that's going to complete the overview for this project. You've got every option under the sun, from a dragon in the dog park to a mech character for what it is that you want to create for this scene. Please just keep in mind that this is about lighting. It's about creating different light sources within your shot. Sorry, trying to find a another example of this. Here's another one. Call this one "The Big Chicken Has Landed," and messing with scale and that rule of 70-30 principles of design. We've got pattern, we've got shape, we've got repetition, gives a large sense of scale within this painting. And this is a quick sketch that I did within an hour. You're going to find that these black and white tonal paintings can go really fast, but it takes quite a bit longer to really get them refined and looking good. So here's some pirates coming into an ominous cave, and there's some creatures within the cave as well that have been really rendered within an inch of their life as you're getting close to them and considered and thought about. And then I had a lot of fun with this one, trying to figure out how to be able to do the bubbles and then really rendering the heck out of those bubbles within the water as well. So we're looking for a lot of detail, a lot of painting, a lot of thinking about how the lighting is working within the scene and how it's dissipating off on the character. So each one, this guy's got the highlights on his face. This one's a little bit darker, and this guy's face has got the most contrast as we're getting closer to the cave. So there's some complex lighting that's happening within this one. It's telling a story, it's making the viewer feel something, and don't forget about the narration. All right, looking forward to seeing what you guys dream up for this next project. Thanks for hearing me out on this, and y'all till next time.